1 Intro. The pain you recognize. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to promise yourself, "This time will be different," and how quietly those promises fade? You don't fail because you're weak. You fail because no one ever taught you how habits actually end. Most people think bad habits are beaten by force, by discipline, motivation, or willpower. So they push harder. They shame themselves. They start again on Monday. And yet, nothing really changes. If that sounds familiar, you're not broken. You're just fighting the wrong battle. In this video, we'll explore an ancient Stoic rule that doesn't demand more effort, only more clarity. But before we go deeper, if you value calm thinking, timeless wisdom, and ideas that actually change how you live, subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers. Here, we don't chase motivation. We build understanding. Now let's begin. 2 Modern struggle, relatable reality. Evelyn doesn't look like someone who's lost control. She wakes up early. She works. She takes care of what needs to be done. From the outside, her life seems stable, even disciplined. But every night, there's that familiar moment. The quiet pause. The thought she doesn't say out loud. Just this once. Daniel is the same in a different way. He plans. He tracks. He promises himself rules he genuinely believes in. And for a few days, things improve. Then stress creeps in. Fatigue lowers his guard. And the habit returns, not loudly, not rebelliously, but comfortably. Neither of them is careless. Neither lacks intelligence. What they share is something far more common. They don't act because they want to fail. They act because, in that moment, the habit still feels useful. It offers relief, distraction, a sense of control, even if it's temporary. This is where most advice breaks down. It tells people to try harder, to add more pressure to a mind that's already exhausted. But Evelyn and Daniel aren't weak. They're trapped in a loop that rewards them just enough to keep repeating. And until that reward is questioned, the habit doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like a solution. 3 Stoic frame, ancient perspective. To the Stoics, this struggle was never a mystery. Nearly 2,000 years ago, they were already observing the same patterns, people repeating behaviors they claimed to hate. But they didn't see habits as moral failures. They saw them as conclusions the mind keeps reaching. Seneca wrote that we are not disturbed by events, but by the judgments we attach to them. A habit survives not because it's strong, but because the mind still believes it provides something valuable. The Stoics never asked, "How do I stop myself?" They asked, "Why does this still seem reasonable to me?" This is where ancient philosophy quietly dismantles modern self-help. Force was never the solution. Control was never the goal. The Stoic approach was observation without anger, attention without shame. When a behavior appears, they wouldn't fight it. They would examine the thought that made it feel necessary. What relief is promised? What fear is being avoided? What false reward is being protected? To the Stoics, clarity was power. Not the loud kind. The kind that makes an action lose its meaning. And when meaning dissolves, the habit no longer has a reason to stay. For the Stoic rule, core teaching. The Stoic rule is deceptively simple, yet deeply unsettling to the modern mind. A habit does not end when you overpower it. It ends when it no longer makes sense to you. The Stoics understood something most people never question. We only repeat behaviors we still believe in. not consciously, quietly. Every habit survives on an invisible agreement between you and your mind. An agreement that says, "This helps me." Force can interrupt that agreement for a while. Discipline can delay it. But neither of them cancels it. That's why willpower feels exhausting. You're not removing the cause. You're holding it down. The Stoic approach is different. Instead of asking, "How do I stop?" you ask, "What belief keeps this alive?" Because once the belief collapses, the habit loses its purpose. Seneca believed that suffering continues only as long as it is interpreted as necessary. The same applies to habits. When the mind clearly sees that the promised relief is shallow, that the comfort is temporary, that the cost quietly outweighs the reward, something shifts. The habit doesn't feel tempting anymore. It feels outdated, almost irrelevant. This is why Stoicism doesn't demand intensity. It demands honesty. You don't attack the habit. You expose the illusion behind it. And illusions don't need to be fought. They disappear when they are seen clearly. 5. Application. How it works in real life. This is how the Stoic rule begins to work, not in theory, but in ordinary moments. Daniel doesn't try to quit his habit all at once. He doesn't create rules or punishments. Instead, he watches. The moment the urge appears, he pauses, not to resist, but to notice. What exactly is being promised here? Relief from stress? Escape from responsibility? A brief feeling of control? He lets the answer surface without judgment. And something unexpected happens. The urge weakens, not because it's denied, but because it's understood. Evelyn experiences this differently, but with the same result. When her habit shows up, she doesn't label it as bad. She asks a quieter question. What am I trying not to feel right now? Sometimes it's loneliness. Sometimes exhaustion. Sometimes the pressure of always having to be okay. She realizes the habit was never the problem. It was a signal. Once that signal is seen clearly, the behavior loses its urgency. There's no inner argument. No dramatic resistance. Just space. This is the part most people miss. Stoicism doesn't replace habits with force. It replaces them with awareness. Daniel notices that the habit only returns when he's rushed or mentally scattered. Evelyn notices it appears when she ignores her own limits. So instead of fighting the behavior, they adjust the condition that feeds it. More rest. More honesty. Fewer illusions about what actually helps. Over time, the habit stops announcing itself. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it stops feeling necessary. And when a behavior is no longer needed, it doesn't require discipline to let go of it. It fades, quietly. 6. Stoic deepening, wisdom expansion. At this point, Stoicism begins to reveal its deeper promise. Most philosophies try to improve behavior. Stoicism tries to improve perception. The Stoics believe that freedom doesn't come from controlling life, it comes from understanding it. This is why they placed such importance on clarity of judgment, not positive thinking, not self-encouragement, but accurate seeing. When you see clearly, desire loses its urgency, fear loses its authority, and habits lose their emotional leverage. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind becomes colored by the thoughts it entertains. If a habit continues, it's because the mind still paints it as useful, soothing, or necessary. Stoic wisdom doesn't rush to remove the habit. It stays with the perception that keeps recreating it. This requires patience, but not passivity. It is an active form of awareness. You begin to notice how quickly the mind exaggerates discomfort, how it dramatizes urges, how it frames avoidance as relief. And with practice, something quiet but powerful happens. You stop identifying with the impulse. It becomes an object of observation, not a command. This is the Stoic shift. From being inside the habit to standing beside it. Once that distance exists, discipline is no longer a battle. It becomes a byproduct of understanding. You are no longer trying to be strong. You are simply no longer confused. And clarity, for the Stoics, was the highest form of self-mastery. 7. Closing. If there's one thing Stoicism reminds us of, it's this. You don't need to become a different person to change your life. You need to see yourself more clearly. Bad habits don't define you. They reflect moments when clarity was missing. And clarity is something you can practice. Not by forcing yourself to improve, but by learning to pause, observe, and understand. The Stoics believed that lasting change doesn't come from intensity. It comes from alignment. When what you see finally matches what is real. So the next time a habit appears, don't rush to fight it. Ask what belief is still keeping it alive. Ask what it's trying to protect you from. And most importantly, ask whether it still deserves your trust. That quiet question may do more than years of discipline ever could. If this reflection resonated with you, take a moment to like the video. It helps this message reach others. Share it with someone who might be stuck in the same cycle. And let us know in the comments. What habit changed once you truly understood it? For more calm thinking, timeless wisdom, and ideas worth returning to, subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers. We'll continue this journey together.